Today on Hebrew Book Review, one of my personal favorites, a newspaper called Beresheet. Back to Hebrew Book Review. Today I am reviewing a newspaper called Bereshit, which you may know is the first word of the Tanakh and is typically translated as in the beginning. This newspaper is published by Good Times Limited and is available at HebrewToday.com. When you get a subscription, there is an online version, a print version, and audio files of the articles to help the super beginners know how the Hebrew is pronounced. So they have different pricing plans that package these different options together. This is not a resource that actually teaches Hebrew. Rather, it's a source of supplemental reading materials that are super relevant to daily life because they are all about the news. And so it is intended for adults because they are the ones who are interested in the news. But occasionally I do find a story that my son likes because it's about an animal or something fun for kids. It's hard to judge the religious content. I'd say maybe 5% religious. It is mostly secular. Occasionally there are stories about places from biblical times or stories about Jewish holidays. I really don't think secular people will have a problem with Bereshit. The font size is a typical style and font for any newspaper or book meant for adults. Nothing is written in cursive, but they do have a chart at the bottom of one page of every issue of the cursive letters. And something that I love, it is written in Kativ Maleh, so it is really preparing the beginner for reading without nikud. The more the reader already knows about Hebrew, the more they will get out of this newspaper. When I found it, I was already at an intermediate level, so I really don't have any firsthand experience with trying to read it as a beginner. But there is a glossary on every page except for the front cover, and its glossary is on the back. So the glossaries cover nearly every word in every article. And the glossaries have a pronunciation guide to help the reader remember how to pronounce the words. Remember or learn how to pronounce the words. Every issue also has all kinds of guides at the bottom of each page to remind the super beginner of things they might have forgotten, such as how the dagesh affects the pronunciation and what the personal endings mean. So this paper comes out bi-weekly, so every 2 weeks, although they seem to take a big holiday during the summer, so maybe a month and a half to 2 months off every summer. And I love how it looks and feels like a real newspaper. It is smaller than a regular newspaper, though. In a moment, I'm going to go through all of the pages of one of the editions to give you a really good feel for the paper. But it's basically a bunch of articles on various topics about Israel and around the world. So here we have an issue from back in 2022. And then there always seem to be 2 articles and 3 teasers on the front page. And the articles on the front cover never have their glossary with them. It's always on the last page. So you just have to flip the paper over if there's a word you don't know. And the titles of the articles are written in Hebrew and in English. And so this is the whole article right here. So a lot of the articles are super short. So on page 2, we have a short little editorial. And then there are letters to the editor, just like in a regular newspaper. And the names of the people and where they are from are written without nikud, and they are not in the glossary. So knowing who wrote the letter or where they live is usually not integral to the understanding of what they wrote. To me, it's an extra little challenge to figure out where they are from and how to say their name. So you can see over here is the glossary for the items on this page. The Hebrew is on the right, and then the transliteration is in italics, and then the English meaning. And all of the words are listed in the order that they appear in the articles. And then down at the bottom of this page is a list of the letters in alphabetical order with their names written in the Latin alphabet. Then on page 3, we have a news section. I mean, isn't the whole thing news? I don't know. But this newspaper comes out every 2 weeks, so it's not exactly your source for breaking news. So there are 2 articles on this page, and down below is the glossary. And then over on the left is the masthead, the list of all the contributors to the newspaper. And at the bottom of this page is a list of the final Sofit letters. Page 4 has 2 more articles and a glossary. Down at the bottom here is a little reading comprehension quiz, and we can see that the answers will be given on page 15. And then way down at the bottom is a reminder of the pronunciation of the vowels. Page 5 has 2 more articles and, of course, a glossary. Up at the top here, we have a little notification that the article to the right, the one on top here, is written here with nikud, but further on in the paper, we will see it again without nikud. And here they're just telling you that this newspaper is a great gift idea. And down below is some more help for the super beginners, a reminder of what the grammatical prefixes mean. So I guess it does have ads. They're just all ads for their own newspaper. Page 6 has just 1 article, and then it focuses on one of the words in the article and gives more information about the other words with the same shoresh, kind of like my Sunday videos. So all of this information is in English because, after all, this is a newspaper for beginners. But we also have a fill-in-the-blank exercise involving some of the words that we learned that are all from the same shoresh. And of course, at the bottom, there's a glossary. On page 7, we have a feature, Places in the Bible. And it just gives some information on a place in Israel that's mentioned in the Tanakh. This isn't in every issue. Often this page has a historical figures section instead. And over on the left here is acronym action. It gives the meaning and background of some commonly used acronym or initialism. And this is great because dictionaries and Google Translate often don't have these. And when we learners come across them, we really can get lost. And then there's a glossary. And then at the bottom of this page, it reminds us how the dagesh affects the pronunciation of the bet, the kaf, and the pe. On page 8 is another article with information about the shoresh of one of its words, just like on page 6. This is one of my favorite features because I love learning about the connection between different words. You can see that at the top of this page, it says that the articles on this page and the next page are written with partial nikud. And this is to help us transition to reading without nikud. And then there's an exercise, just like on page 6. And at the bottom of this page, they talk about the letters that sometimes indicate vowels, especially in Nikudless writing. Page 9 has articles in Hebrew for the advanced readers. And the articles are slightly longer and have maybe a little more complicated syntax. And at the bottom of this page is a list of the possessive pronouns. Page 10 is the longest reading that we have to do. It is a dialogue of some really typical conversation. And even though it's always really long, this section is great because it introduces us to vocabulary that we never get elsewhere in the newspaper. But I will admit, I do sometimes get a little lost in this section. And of course, there's a glossary, and then at the bottom, a list of subject pronouns. Page 11 has a short story. So this is a story that is not news at all, but is often adapted from some Jewish folk story. And over here is the article that we read before with Nikud, and here it is without Nikud. And down here is the glossary for the article on this page, and also the end of the glossary from the last page, because the glossary for the dialogue never fits on the page that it's on. And then here's an activity that's related to the article from the previous page, the dialogue. There is usually an activity here, but it is different every time and not always related to the dialogue. And then down at the bottom, we have letters with a schwa under them. I'm not sure why. On page 12, we have an article from Beresheet's sister paper, Yanshuf, which has a similar format but is for more advanced readers. I'll do a review of Yanshuf in a few weeks so that you can see what that looks like as well. Of course, there's a glossary, and then at the bottom are all of the letters in print and cursive. On page 13, we have 2 articles. This one on top is a feature that appears in a lot of issues. It gives information about words with multiple meanings, so homonyms. And of course, the glossary. And then at the bottom, information on shin versus sin. Page 14 is always a bunch of word games. I never actually do the games. I was a little overwhelmed by them when I was a new reader, and now I just don't have time. But they seem like they would be fun if you like word games. And page 15 has the answers to all of the exercises and games, and a couple of ads for other products available at HebrewToday.com. And then page 16 has 2 articles and the glossary for these articles and the articles from the front page. So that is a pretty typical edition. Wow, I feel like I could talk for an hour about what I love about this newspaper. I can tell they really know what a language learner needs. I have a degree in teaching English as a second language, and I can see a lot of the techniques that I learned in class in this newspaper. For example, most of the writing uses full nikud, but it prepares the learner to step up by offering a few articles with partial nikud and then 1 article in every edition with no nikud. Also, having titles in English gives the reader a sense of what the article is about and helps us make better guesses about the meanings of words that we might not know, we might have seen once or twice, or maybe we know the shoresh, and knowing the general topic of the article will help us make that connection without having to go to the glossary. I like that the articles are short so that the beginners don't get overwhelmed. Sometimes when you struggle so much with reading a text, and it's a longer text, then by the end of it, you don't remember what you read at the beginning. One thing that took me a while to notice is that they often include vocabulary words in different contexts. So, for example, in this edition, I noticed the word tsafuf, which means crowded. It's here in this article about overcrowding at Ben Gurion Airport. And it's here in this article about parking in Tel Aviv. And then it's also in the daily conversation where they're at the playground and they talk about that it has gotten more crowded now that they put in a new slide. So when we learn new vocabulary, repetition is really important. So seeing a word over and over in the same edition in different contexts is really helpful. I also noticed that there is similar vocabulary across the editions. When I started reading Bereshit, my grammar knowledge was pretty advanced, but I had a very, very small vocabulary. And at first, I had to look up almost every word in the glossary. After a few editions, I noticed that I recognized words. Maybe I didn't know what they meant, but I knew I had seen them before. And slowly but surely, I began to remember, be able to figure them out. And then I started to know a lot more words. And I also love that the reader learns really current vocabulary. When COVID came around, every edition had articles talking using vocabulary such as virus, vaccine, isolation, lockdown. It was on everyone's mind. And I was able to talk about it in Hebrew because I had been reading the newspaper and I had that vocabulary. And I do love the glossaries because they give the meanings of the words as they are used in the articles. So many words have completely unrelated meanings. And if you use something like Google for help, it often gives you only one definition. As for shortcomings, I mean, are there any? The only thing that seems a little off to me is that they have all these little reminders about the alphabet for super beginners. But there is no way that super beginners would be able to read a newspaper like this. It is for lower level learners, but students who don't know what a schwa is or who don't know how a dagesh affects pronunciation really have no business reading a newspaper. And there is no explicit grammar instruction for these super beginners. There's tons of information on vocabulary. And intermediate learners can notice interesting grammatical and structures and make a mental note. But super beginners, I think, will definitely be confused by the Hebrew syntax. So I really recommend Bereshit for students who already understand basic Hebrew syntax and are able to read sentences. I always have at least one edition, sometimes many, in my purse, so that if I'm ever standing in line anywhere, I can just whip it out and start reading. And I really do credit Bereshit for my expanded vocabulary. So that's it for Bereshit. If you have any questions or feedback, please leave it in the comments and I will do my best to respond. Also, if you have some book that you'd like me to review, let me know and I will put it on the list for a future video. Hit like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe and press the notification bell if you want to see more. Don't forget that on Sundays, I upload a vocabulary video, and on Tuesdays, I upload a grammar video. So go and check those out. Or just wait for next Thursday when I will review a book called Tirasham, which is a children's board book and really cute, written in Hebrew. Lehitraot bapa'am haba'a. See you next time.